Lemire was talking in our last segment about 68 million votes for Kamala Harris in this election, where Joe Biden got 81 million votes 4 years ago. So turnout in Democratic strongholds was a problem. According to the New York Times, Mrs. Harris's defeat is not entirely explained by the voters' embrace of Mr. Trump. After months of flagging voter enthusiasm, there were signs many Democrats simply failed to show up in key party strongholds. In Wayne County, Michigan, which includes Detroit, unofficial results showed Ms. Harris had won 6% fewer votes than President Biden had won 4 years ago. And turnout declined about 6 percentage points in Philadelphia County, Pennsylvania, according to unofficial results. Ms. Harris's vote total slipped while Mr. Trump's increased. But the common thread among those who did gravitate toward Mr. Trump appeared to be a working class identity, regardless of neighborhood. And Jeremy Peters, that is the thread. Through race, through identity, through everything else, prices were too high. They didn't believe that Kamala Harris, who was attached to Joe Biden, was going to help them improve their lives, and they're willing to take a shot that Donald Trump will.
Right, Willie. Presidential elections, as we all know, are often referenda on the incumbent. And in this case, even though she wasn't the president, she was seen as an extension of the Biden administration. And voters overwhelmingly felt they would be giving Biden a second term by electing her. I think you hit it on the head there with that line from our story about the way that people, the results of this election can't be explained solely by Trump and an affinity that voters have for him, because that's not true. If you look at the exit polls, something like 40% of the people who said they were voting against her. If you look at in the ways people, when they were asked, is your vote primarily for your candidate or against the other guy? And 40% said they were voting against her. So that tells you, to Joe's point, that something has broken down with the contract that voters in these urban areas, and it wasn't just urban areas, it was rural, it was suburban, that they feel like they don't have that anymore with the Democratic Party, that the Democratic Party isn't offering them the ticket to a more comfortable life, a better life, one where they can afford a house, where their rent isn't soaring, where groceries aren't so high, one where they feel like the country is headed in the right direction and their politicians are looking out for their values. I think you can't have this conversation about 2024 without first having a conversation about what happened in 2020 in the Democratic primaries and how far away from the average voter Democrats got.
How far away from that's an interesting question. That figure about voting against Kamala Harris. So do we have a sense of, is that because of her identification with the Biden administration? Is that because of who she is or who she has painted, who she was painted to be? Some combination? You have any idea?
Yeah, I think it's all the above, because when you look at how broad the repudiation was of her in the Democratic Party, it extended into just about every county in the United States. So I don't think there's one single explanation for why people voted against her, right? I mean, you're talking about black, brown, young, some old, you know, I mean, people who of all demographics, education levels, decided that they were going to support Trump in greater numbers.
Well, canvassers that just, I hate them. I hate Joe Biden. I hate them with no, where'd that come from?
I know her overall black support was like 86% or something like that. Yeah. So that was, I mean, that's still very high. That's a little bit lower than normal, but among Latinos, way down, and among the white working class, almost non-existent.
Joe, jump in.
Problem.
Well, I want to bring in David Drucker. David, I keep looking over the map here, and I keep looking, of course, in the blue wall states, they were all competitive. They really were. I mean, you're talking 2 points about in Pennsylvania, about 1.5 in Michigan, 1 in Wisconsin. That truly ended up being her only way forward. What I'm looking at, though, is the larger map, looking at the United States as a whole and looking at some of these states that, like, for instance, Texas. Texas is a state that Democrats have believed for 2 decades now they were going to catch up with the Republicans on because of the changing demographics. There's a state last time, I don't know, maybe it was 6 points, 7 points, but they were making progress in Texas. It had gone from 12 points to 9 points, I believe 6 points. Donald Trump wins Texas by 14 points, despite the fact a lot of the suburbs of Dallas have turned from red to blue. You go to the state of Florida. Florida is a state that Democrats were shocked by 4 years ago because Joe Biden lost by 3-4 points in the state of Florida. Florida is a state now that has been flooded by Republicans from the Northeast and has turned the brightest shade of red. 14-point victory for Donald Trump, from 3.5 points for Joe Biden, which Democrats saw as a disaster, to 14 points, 14 points for Kamala Harris. You go up to Ohio. Ohio is a state that Barack Obama won. That was a Democratic-leaning state in 2008, 2012. That is a state that just keeps getting more red by the year. That is a 12-vote difference. You take Florida, Texas, Ohio, 3 of the bigger states in America, and with Texas and Florida, 2 of the fastest-growing states in America. I love talking about how Texas now has a larger GDP than Russia. A lot of people that don't want to pay taxes in California, they go to Texas. So you have all of these things happening. And yes, the 3 blue wall states still competitive, but you can't even call them the blue wall states anymore. They're more red than blue. And forgive me, I just want to go one bit deeper, though, because people will say, and they will be right, and yet the Democrats held on, won the Senate in Wisconsin, won the Senate race in Michigan, and just may keep it close enough for a little while longer for Casey to get even closer to McCormick, though it looks like McCormick's going to win that for the Republican Party. But those states are still fairly competitive, and Gallego in Arizona may win that. So I'm throwing a lot at you, but while there are still competitive races and other Democratic candidates are doing well in places, I'm looking at states like Texas. I'm looking at states like Florida. I'm looking at states like Ohio that have gone deep red and may never come back for Democrats.
Well, look, Joe, victory and failure in politics is often overinterpreted, which is why we end up with these wild swings back and forth. But I will say, in some ways, I think once we're done sifting through all the numbers, and it's going to take some time, we're going to find out that this was rather uncomplicated. When voters, number one, worry that they can't afford to eat and worry about their own public safety, meaning they're worried they're going to get physically harmed, they're going to vote for the party that they think is going to do a better job, or they're going to vote against the party that they think is responsible or not doing enough about these conditions. And we had skyrocketing inflation during Biden's presidency. And even though inflation is down, costs have not yet caught up. They will, but they haven't. And the Biden administration made decisions via executive authority about how it wanted to handle the southern border with Mexico that resulted in a lot of people being here illegally, and people were very unsettled about it, and that included more than just conservative Republicans. And then an additional thing, which is something which has been happening over the past several years, but I think during the pandemic was really exacerbated, is that on cultural issues that go beyond abortion rights and things of that nature, there are a lot of voters that are not necessarily Republicans, but have not been comfortable with how they believe the Democratic Party has approached things like trans rights and things like that, particularly as it relates to what goes on in public schools. You can agree or disagree with it, but it is a fact, and I think it has helped Republicans in the suburbs sort of stem their losses that occurred during Trump's presidency. I'll say one final thing here, and that is that for the last, 10, 15 years, the Democratic Party was able to maintain a pretty broad coalition, first based around Barack Obama, a generational talent as a politician, and then around Donald Trump, a shocking president for many people that caused them to say, even if I, agree with a lot of his policies, I can't get on board with this stuff. And that was true, especially for a while after January 6th. Once Donald Trump became a more normal politician in their eyes because they got used to him, and once they had core concerns about going to the grocery store and affording the food that they needed, and were their neighborhoods safe, you can argue all day about how the news may or may not have been presented fairly. It doesn't matter. It's how they felt. I talked to voters about this across the swing states. This is what I heard. They were willing to say, you know what, I'm going to be for that guy, because when he was president, he may have acted like a jerk. And they told me this. I don't like the way he behaved. I wouldn't behave that way. But, he did a lot of normal Republican things, and I had more money in my pocket, and my neighborhood felt safer.
Well, and they got numbed even to the most outrageous things that he said regarding executions, using the Army, the National Guard against political opponents, shutting down CBS because he doesn't like to edit. I mean, you could talk to him about it. They'd be like, he's not going to do that. He's just talking. It's all part of his shtick. But you can talk about that if you want to in a second. I do want to follow up on something that you said, because it's something that Democrats have never talked about. I've tried to get them to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. You try to bring up, as we have on this program before, how Democrats and independents, as well as Republicans, feel about this wokeism. And they will roll their eyes and go, what is woke? Well, let me tell you, parents know what it is. It's their kids going to college or their kids going to high school, not being able to talk without fear of being canceled or fear of being shunned or fear of being knocked out. And as far as the transgender ad that we keep talking about, that we've been talking about now for a month now, there's a reason that the Trump campaign ran it 30,000 times, because they knew, just as party leaders in Wisconsin and across the Midwest have said, that concerns people. It seems Republicans are too extreme. So